The bullet grazed Florence Morrison's shoulder as she dove behind the overturned wagon, her teeth clenched so hard her jaw ached. But she would not scream, would not give those men the satisfaction of hearing her fear turn to sound. It was June 1878 in Stockton, California, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dirt road where her father's body lay still, 3 bullets in his chest, while 4 men on horseback circled like vultures, their laughter cutting through the hot air worse than any blade. Florence pressed her hand against the splintered wood, feeling the rough grain bite into her palm. Blood seeped through her sleeve where the bullet had torn fabric and flesh, but she kept her breathing steady, kept her face a mask of stone even though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had watched her father fall, watched the light leave his eyes, and she had not cried then either. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. Not when 4 armed men wanted the deed to their ranch, not when showing weakness meant showing them a way to break her. "Come on out, girl," one of them called, his voice thick with whiskey and malice. "We do not want to hurt you. Just sign over that land your daddy left, and we will let you walk away." Florence knew better. She had seen what happened to women who trusted men like these. She reached for her father's rifle, the one that had fallen near the wagon wheel, her fingers closing around the worn stock. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12. Said a woman in the West needed to know how to protect herself. She had never imagined she would need that lesson like this. Another shot rang out, splintering the wood above her head. Splinters rained down on her hair, and she felt a sharp sting on her cheek. But still her face remained impassive. She would not let them see her cry or break. That was what her mother had told her before the fever took her 3 years ago. "Never let them see you weak, Florence. A strong face is armor when you have nothing else." The sound of hoofbeats changed, grew closer, but from a different direction. Florence risked a glance around the wagon's edge and saw a 5th rider approaching fast, dust rising in a cloud behind his horse. He wore a dark hat pulled low, and even from this distance she could see the way he sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man born in the saddle. "That is far enough, gentlemen," the newcomer's voice carried across the space, deep and steady. He reined in his horse about 20 yards away, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. But Florence could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging threats. "This is none of your concern, stranger," the leader of the 4 men spat. He was a heavy-set man with a scar running down his left cheek, and Florence recognized him as Dutch Carmichael, one of the men who worked for Marcus Thornton, the railroad man who wanted her family's land for his expansion plans. "I am making it my concern." The stranger's horse took a few steps forward, and Florence could see him better now. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled at his collar, and a face that was all hard angles and sun-weathered skin. "I count 4 of you and 1 woman behind that wagon. Those do not strike me as fair odds." "She has got a rifle," another man pointed out, nervous now. "Then I suggest you ride out before she decides to use it," the stranger said, his voice carrying a note of steel beneath the calm surface. "Or before I decide to even things up a bit more." Dutch laughed, but it was forced. "You are outnumbered, friend." "Am I?" The stranger's hand moved with liquid speed, drawing his revolver and firing twice before any of the 4 men could react. The first shot took the hat clean off Dutch's head. The second shattered the whiskey bottle hanging from another man's saddle. "That was me being friendly. The next shots will not be." Florence watched the exchange with her heart in her throat, her finger on the trigger of her own rifle, ready to shoot if this stranger proved to be just another threat. But something in his voice, in the set of his shoulders, told her he was not like the others. The 4 men looked at each other, fear replacing bravado. Dutch's face had gone pale beneath his tan. "Thornton will not stand for this." "Thornton can come talk to me himself if he has objections," Reamer, the stranger said. "Now ride." They went, spurring their horses into a gallop that sent dust billowing across the road. Florence watched them disappear around the bend, and only then did she allow herself to lower the rifle. Her hands were shaking now, tremors running through her whole body, but she clamped down on the reaction with iron will. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the way her legs felt like water, and stepped out from behind the wagon. The stranger had dismounted and was walking toward her, his gun holstered now, his hands visible and empty. He stopped a respectful distance away, his eyes taking in her bloodied sleeve, her too pale face, the body of her father lying in the dirt. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked, and his voice was gentler now, concerned. "I am fine," Florence said, and her voice did not shake. That was something. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Vincent Vance," he supplied, touching the brim of his hat. "And you are more than welcome, miss." "Florence Morrison." She looked past him to where her father lay. "That is my father, William Morrison. Those men wanted our ranch. They wanted him to sign it over, and when he refused." She stopped, swallowed hard, but her eyes remained dry. "They shot him." Vincent followed her gaze, and something in his expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." Florence nodded once, sharp and quick. She walked over to her father's body and knelt beside him, her skirt pooling in the dust. With careful hands she closed his eyes, smoothed his hair back from his forehead. Vincent watched her, saw the rigid control in every line of her body, the way she held herself like a soldier at attention. "We should get him somewhere proper," Vincent said quietly, "and someone should look at your arm." "I can tend it myself," Florence said, standing. She wiped her hands on her skirt, leaving dark smears. "If you would help me get him into the wagon, I would be grateful. Our ranch is 2 miles west of here." Vincent studied her for a long moment, and Florence forced herself to meet his eyes. They were gray-blue like storm clouds over the ocean, and there was an intelligence in them that unsettled her. She felt like he was seeing too much, looking past the armor she had constructed so carefully. "All right," he said finally. "Let us get him loaded up." Together they lifted William Morrison's body into the wagon bed. Vincent moved with a careful gentleness that surprised Florence. Most cowboys she knew were rough in their handling of everything, but this man treated her father's body with the reverence due to the dead. When they had him settled, Vincent retrieved a blanket from his saddle pack and covered the body without being asked. "I will drive," Vincent said, reaching for the wagon seat. "I can manage," Florence protested. "I am sure you can," Vincent agreed. "But you are bleeding, and you just watched your father die. Let me help." Florence wanted to argue, wanted to insist she needed no one, but the truth was her shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, and the shock was starting to set in despite her best efforts to hold it at bay. She climbed into the seat beside Vincent, and he clicked his tongue at the horses, starting them into motion. His own horse, a handsome bay gelding, was tied to the back of the wagon. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of hooves on the hard-packed road. Florence kept her eyes forward, her back straight, but she was acutely aware of the man beside her. He handled the reins with practiced ease, his movements economical and sure. "How did you happen to come along when you did?" Florence asked finally, more to break the oppressive silence than out of real curiosity. "I was riding into Stockton looking for work," Vincent said. "Heard the shots and figured someone might need help. Turns out I was right." "You are not from around here?" "Lately from Nevada," Vincent said, and was before that Montana. "I go where the work is." "What kind of work?" "Ranching, mostly, some horse breaking. Whatever pays honest wages." He glanced at her sideways. "I take it your father ran a ranch." "Cattle ranch," Florence confirmed. 300 head, good water, decent grazing. That is why Marcus Thornton wants it. The railroad is coming through, and our land sits right in the path he wants for his expansion. He has been pressuring my father to sell for 6 months. When father refused, she gestured helplessly at the wagon bed behind them. "So Thornton sent his men to change his mind permanently," Vincent finished, his voice grim. "That is about the shape of it." Florence looked down at her hands. at the blood dried dark under her fingernails. I suppose he will come after me next. The land passes to me now. Will you sell? The question made something fierce and hot rise in Florence's chest. Never. This land is my father's legacy, my mother's memory. They built that ranch from nothing, broke their backs to make it profitable. I would sooner burn it to the ground than let Marcus Thornton have it. Vincent was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You are going to need help. One woman alone against Thornton and his hired guns is not sustainable odds." "I can handle myself," Florence said, but even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. "I do not doubt you can," Vincent said, "but even the toughest person needs someone watching their back. I am between jobs anyway. You could use a ranch hand, and I could use a place to stay for a while. Seems like it might work out for both of us." Florence turned to look at him fully for the first time. He kept his eyes on the road, giving her the space to study him without the pressure of his gaze. He had a strong profile, a straight nose, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. There were lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into too many sunsets, and a small scar on his chin that she wondered about. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You do not know me. This is not your fight." Now Vincent did look at her, and the directness of his gaze made her breath catch. "Call it not liking bullies," he said, "or call it seeing someone who needs help and having the ability to provide it. Does the reason matter so much?" "In my experience, men always have reasons," Florence said, "and those reasons usually benefit them more than anyone else." "Fair enough," Vincent acknowledged. "Then how about this? Room and board plus $30 a month. I will work your ranch, help keep Thornton's men off your land, and when the trouble is over, I will move on to the next job. Clean and simple." It was a fair offer, better than fair, considering he was offering to put himself in danger on her behalf. Florence wanted to refuse on principle, wanted to prove she could handle everything alone, but she was not stupid. Vincent was right. She needed help, and he was offering it with no apparent strings attached. "Room and board and $40 a month," she countered. "If you are going to risk getting shot at, you should be paid properly for it." A smile tugged at the corner of Vincent's mouth, the first hint of humor she had seen from him. "Deal." They shook on it, and Florence was surprised by the warmth of his hand, the calluses that spoke of hard work and long days. He held her hand for just a moment longer than necessary and then released it, turning his attention back to the horses. The Morrison ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was not large by California standards, but it was well kept, with a sturdy ranch house painted white, a big red barn, and several outbuildings. Fences marked off pastures where cattle grazed, and Florence could see the windmill turning lazily in the breeze, pumping water into the stock tank. "It is a good piece of land," Vincent observed. "It is home," Florence said simply. They pulled up to the house, and Florence climbed down before Vincent could come around to help her. Her shoulders screamed in protest, and she had to grip the wagon wheel for a moment until the wave of dizziness passed. When she looked up, Vincent was watching her with concern, but he did not comment on her obvious pain. "I will get some of the hands to help move your father," Vincent said. "Where is everyone?" "Father sent them out to the north pasture this morning to check the fences," Florence said. "They will not be back until sundown." "Then I will do it myself," Vincent said. "You go inside and tend that arm. I will be in once I have seen to things out here." Florence wanted to argue, but the truth was she felt lightheaded and sick, and the thought of trying to move her father's body herself made something in her chest constrict painfully. She nodded once and walked toward the house, her steps measured and careful. Inside, the house was cool and dim, the curtains drawn against the afternoon heat. Florence moved through the familiar space like a ghost, going to the kitchen to retrieve the medical supplies her mother had always kept in a cabinet by the stove. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned her blood-soaked sleeve, and she had to stop twice, forcing herself to breathe slowly to maintain control. The wound was not as bad as it could have been. The bullet had gouged a furrow through the meat of her shoulder but had not lodged in the bone. It bled sluggishly now, and Florence knew she needed to clean it and bandage it before infection could set in. She poured water from the pitcher into a basin and rolled up her sleeve, hissing between her teeth as the fabric pulled away from the wound. She had just started to clean the blood away when she heard boots on the porch. Vincent knocked once and then entered when she called for him to come in. He took in the scene at a glance, his eyes moving from her face to the wound and back again. "You should not be doing that yourself," he said. "I am the only one here," Florence pointed out, "unless you have medical training I do not know about." "Some," Vincent admitted. "I have patched up more than my fair share of injuries over the years, may I?" Florence hesitated, but the wound was in an awkward position, and she was already exhausted from maintaining her composure. "All right." Vincent washed his hands in the basin and then moved to stand beside her. His touch was gentle as he examined the wound, his fingers careful not to cause unnecessary pain. Florence stared at the wall, refusing to look at what he was doing, focusing all her energy on keeping her breathing steady. "This is going to hurt," Vincent warned, and then he poured whiskey directly into the wound. Florence's vision went white with pain. Her fingernails dug into the table edge hard enough to leave marks in the wood, and a small sound escaped her throat despite her best efforts. But she did not cry out, did not sob. Vincent worked quickly, cleaning the wound thoroughly before applying a salve that smelled of herbs and binding it with clean bandages. "You are tougher than most men I have met," Vincent said quietly as he tied off the bandage. "I have had practice," Florence said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and distant. Vincent pulled out a chair and guided her into it. "Sit for a minute. You have had a hell of a day." Florence wanted to protest, but the truth was her legs felt boneless. She sat, and Vincent moved around her kitchen with surprising competence, finding the coffee pot in the grounds, building up the fire in the stove. Within minutes, the smell of brewing coffee filled the kitchen, rich and bitter. He poured 2 cups and set one in front of her before taking the chair across the table. They sat in silence, drinking the hot, strong coffee, and Florence felt some of the coldness inside her begin to thaw. "Your father is in the barn," Vincent said after a while. "Laid out proper? I imagine you will want to see about a funeral service." Florence nodded. "Tomorrow." Father was not much for church, but he knew most folks in town. They should have a chance to pay respects. "I can ride into town in the morning, make the arrangements if you want." "Thank you," Florence said. She stared into her coffee cup, seeing her reflection distorted in the dark liquid. "Mr. Vance." "Vincent," he corrected gently. "Vincent?" She tried the name. Found it fit him somehow. "Why are you really helping me? No one does something like this without a reason." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I had a sister," he said finally. "Younger than me by 3 years. When I was 21 and she was 18, our farm in Missouri was targeted by raiders during the war. They wanted supplies, livestock. My father refused to give them everything. They shot him. Shot my mother, too. Sarah, my sister, she tried to fight them off. She had our father's old pistol, and she shot one of them before they—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "They killed her, too. I was in town when it happened, came home to find everyone dead. I did not get there in time to help. Could not save any of them." Florence felt something crack in her chest, a fissure in the armor she had built so carefully. "I am sorry." "It was 8 years ago," Vincent said, "but I remember what it felt like, finding them like that. Remember the helplessness, so when I see someone in trouble, someone who needs help, I help. Because maybe I could not save my family, but I can try to save someone else's." He looked up at her, his eyes shadowed. "That is the real reason. Not charity, not nobility, just a man trying to balance the scales." "Scales do not balance like that," Florence said softly. "Loss is not something you can make up for." "No," Vincent agreed, "but you can try to make sure the loss does not get any bigger. You could have died today, Florence. Those men would have killed you once they had what they wanted. If I can prevent that, if I can help you hold on to what is yours, then maybe all the deaths I have seen mean something." Florence set down her coffee cup and looked at him properly, really looked at him. She saw the grief he carried, the guilt that drove him, the fundamental decency that made him ride toward the gunfire instead of away from it. She saw someone who understood loss, who knew what it meant to build walls around yourself to keep the pain contained. "I will not let them take this ranch," she said, and her voice was steady, sure. "I will fight them with everything I have." "I know you will," Vincent said, "and I will be right beside you when you do." The sound of horses outside made them both tense. Vincent's hand dropped to his gun automatically, but Florence held up a hand. "That will be the ranch hands coming back." She stood and went to the door, stepping out onto the porch as 5 men rode up, their faces tired from a long day's work. They pulled up short when they saw the wagon, saw the blood still dark on the dirt, saw Vincent standing in the doorway behind Florence. "Miss Morrison?" The oldest of them, a grizzled man named Jack Sullivan, who had worked for her father for 15 years, swung down from his horse with alarm clear on his weathered face. "What happened? Where is your father?" Florence felt the weight of their eyes on her, felt the expectation that she would break down, would need comfort and support. She stood straighter, lifted her chin, and made her voice carry. "My father was murdered this afternoon on the Stockton Road. Marcus Thornton's men shot him when he refused to sign over the ranch. They tried to kill me too, but this man," she gestured to Vincent, "intervened and drove them off." The silence that followed was thick with shock. Jack's face went gray. "Boss Morrison is dead?" "Yes," Florence said. And still her voice did not waver, still her eyes remained dry. "The funeral will be tomorrow. Tonight we have work to do. This ranch does not stop running because my father is gone. Jack, you are foreman now. Keep the men working, keep the ranch running. This is Vincent Vance. I have hired him on as an additional hand. He will be staying in the bunkhouse." Jack looked from Florence to Vincent and back again, confusion and grief warring on his face. "Miss Morrison, should not I what?" Florence cut him off, her voice sharp. "Fall apart? Weep? Take to my bed? This ranch is under threat, Jack. Marcus Thornton wants it, and he is willing to kill to get it. I will not give him the satisfaction of seeing me weak. I will not give him an opening to take what is mine. So we work, we keep going, and we prepare for whatever comes next." The men exchanged glances, and Florence could see the doubt in their eyes, the question of whether a woman could really hold a ranch together under these circumstances. She stared them down one by one until they dropped their gazes. "Anyone who does not want to stay through the trouble that is coming, I understand," she said. "You will get your wages and a good reference, but if you stay, I expect loyalty and hard work. Am I understood?" "Yes, madam," Jack said after a moment, and the others echoed him. "Good. See to your horses and get some dinner. Tomorrow will be a long day." The men dispersed, leading their horses toward the barn. Vincent stepped up beside Florence on the porch, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "That was well done," he said quietly. "That was necessary," Florence corrected. "They need to see strength, not weakness. If I crack now, they will lose faith. Men do not follow a woman who weeps." "Men should follow anyone who has the strength to lead," Vincent said. "And you have that in spades. But Florence, you know you do not have to be strong every moment, right? What happened today, what you lost, that deserves grief." "Grief is a luxury," Florence said, and her voice was flat, emotionless. "I will grieve when Thornton is dealt with, when the ranch is secure, when I can afford to be weak. Until then, I stay strong." Vincent looked like he wanted to say something more, but he just nodded. "I will go introduce myself to the men properly, get settled in the bunkhouse." "Vincent," Florence said as he started down the steps. He turned back and she said, "Thank you for today, for staying, for understanding." "No thanks needed," he said, and then he was gone, walking across the yard toward the barn where the ranch hands were gathered. Florence stood alone on the porch as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. Her father was dead. She was alone. And tomorrow she would have to bury him and face a town that would be watching to see if she broke. She would not break. She would not let them see her cry. No matter what it cost her, she would be strong, even if it killed her. The funeral was held at 10 in the morning at the small church on the edge of Stockton. It seemed like half the town turned out, crowding into the pews and spilling out into the churchyard. William Morrison had been well respected, and news of his murder had spread like wildfire through the community. Florence stood at the front of the church in her black mourning dress, her face a mask of composure. People came up to her one after another, offering condolences, squeezing her hands, telling her how sorry they were for her loss. She accepted each expression of sympathy with a nod and a quiet thank you, her voice never wavering, her eyes never filling with tears. Vincent stood in the back of the church, watching her hold herself together through sheer force of will. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched into fists when she thought no one was looking. She was wound tight as a bowstring, and he wondered how long she could maintain that control before something snapped. The service was simple and moving. The pastor spoke about William Morrison's integrity, his hard work, his dedication to his family and his land. He did not mention the circumstances of his death, but everyone in the church knew. The anger in the room was palpable, a living thing that hummed beneath the prayers and hymns. After the service, they carried the coffin to the cemetery on the hill overlooking the town. The pallbearers were ranch hands and fellow ranchers, men who had worked beside William or shared a drink with him at the saloon. Florence walked behind the coffin, her back straight, her steps measured. Vincent walked with the other mourners, keeping his distance but keeping her in sight. At the graveside, Florence stood alone at the head of the coffin. The pastor said the final words, and the coffin was lowered into the ground. One by one, mourners filed past, dropping handfuls of dirt onto the lid. When it was Florence's turn, she knelt and picked up a handful of California soil, rich and dark. She held it for a moment, and Vincent saw her lips move, though he could not hear the words. Then she let the dirt fall, brushing her hands clean with careful precision. As the crowd began to disperse, a man in an expensive suit made his way toward Florence. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cold calculation in his eyes. Vincent recognized him immediately. Marcus Thornton. "Miss Morrison," Thornton said, his voice oozing false sympathy, "please accept my deepest condolences for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Was he?" Florence's voice was ice. "Then why did your men murder him?" The crowd around them went silent. People stopped, turned, watching the confrontation unfold. Thornton's face tightened, but he maintained his sympathetic expression. "I assure you, Miss Morrison, I had nothing to do with what happened to your father. Those men acted on their own, and I have already dismissed them from my employ." "How convenient," Florence said. 4 men decide to murder my father for his land, the same land you have been trying to buy for months, and it has nothing to do with you." "I understand you are grieving," Thornton said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone, "but you should not make accusations you cannot prove. However, I do recognize that you are in a difficult position. A young woman alone, trying to run a ranch, facing uncertain times. That is why I am prepared to make you a generous offer for your property. More than generous, really. You could take the money, move somewhere easier, start fresh." "I am not selling," Florence said clearly, loudly enough that everyone in the cemetery could hear. "Not to you, not to anyone. This land is mine, and it is staying mine." Thornton's sympathetic mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold anger beneath. "You are making a mistake, Miss Morrison. This is dangerous country for a woman alone. Accidents happen. It would be a shame if something unfortunate befell you." Vincent had heard enough. He moved through the crowd, placing himself beside Florence, his presence solid and protective. "She is not alone," he said, his voice carrying a warning. And if any more accidents happen, I will make sure the right people face consequences for them. Thornton looked Vincent up and down, his lip curling. And who are you? Someone you do not want as an enemy, Vincent said flatly. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, and the air between them crackled with tension. Then Thornton smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. We will see how long your bravado lasts, cowboy. This town belongs to me, and soon, so will the Morrison ranch. He tipped his hat to Florence, mocking. Good day, Miss Morrison. I will be in touch when you're ready to be reasonable. He walked away, and the crowd parted for him like water. When he was gone, the mourners began to disperse, shooting sympathetic glances at Florence but keeping their distance. No one wanted to be seen as too supportive, not when Thornton's reach extended so far. You did not have to do that, Florence said quietly to Vincent once they were alone by the grave. Yes, I did, Vincent said. He was threatening you. He needed to know you have someone in your corner. Florence looked at him, and for just a moment something flickered in her eyes, some emotion too quick to name. Then it was gone, and her mask was back in place. We should get back to the ranch. They walked to where Vincent had left the wagon, and he helped her up onto the seat. The ride back was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Vincent kept replaying Thornton's threat in his mind, turning over the implications. The man was not going to give up. He would keep pushing, keep attacking, until he got what he wanted or until someone stopped him. When they reached the ranch, Florence climbed down and started toward the house without a word. Vincent watched her go, seeing the exhaustion in every line of her body. She had made it through the funeral without breaking, but the cost was written in the set of her shoulders. The way she moved, like every step, hurt. Over the next week, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Vincent threw himself into the work, learning the lay of the land, the patterns of the herd, the quirks of the other ranch hands. Jack Sullivan warmed to him quickly, recognizing in Vincent a man who knew his business and worked hard. The other men followed Jack's lead, accepting Vincent as one of their own. Florence ran the ranch with an iron hand, making decisions quickly and decisively. She rode out with the men to check fences, to move cattle, to handle the 100 daily tasks that kept a ranch running. She never complained, never showed weakness, never acknowledged the injury to her shoulder that Vincent knew still pained her. But Vincent watched her, and he saw the cracks forming. He saw the way her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. He saw the shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He saw the way she would sometimes stop in the middle of a task and stare into the distance, her face going blank, and he knew she was seeing her father fall, was reliving that moment over and over. One evening, about 10 days after the funeral, Vincent was walking back from checking on a horse with a lame foot when he heard a sound coming from the barn. It was soft, quickly muffled, but he recognized it instantly, the sound of someone trying not to cry. He found Florence in an empty stall at the back of the barn, sitting on the floor with her knees drawn up to her chest, her face buried in her arms. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and even now, even alone, she was trying to hold back the sounds, trying to keep the grief quiet and contained. Vincent's heart broke for her. He stood in the doorway for a moment, debating whether to leave her to her privacy or to do something. But he remembered his own grief after his family died, remembered the suffocating loneliness of trying to hold it all in, and he could not walk away. He moved quietly into the stall and sat down beside her, not touching, just being present. Florence jerked her head up, her eyes wide and wet with tears, her face flushed with shame at being caught. "I am sorry," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I should not. I will be fine in a moment." "Florence," Vincent said gently, "you do not have to apologize. Not to me. Not for this." "I am supposed to be strong," she said, and now the tears were flowing freely, tracking down her cheeks faster than she could wipe them away. "I have to keep it together. If the men see me like this, if Thornton finds out I am weak—" "You are not weak," Vincent said firmly. "You are grieving. That is human. It does not make you less strong. If anything, trying to hold all of this inside that takes more strength than most people will ever have to show. I cannot break, Florence whispered. If I break, I will not be able to put myself back together. If I start crying, I might never stop. Then cry now, Vincent said, here, where no one else can see. Let it out before it eats you alive from the inside. You are safe to feel with me. Florence, I will not judge you. I will not think less of you. I will not tell anyone. Just please let yourself feel this. Florence looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or mockery. She found none. What she saw instead was understanding, compassion, and a depth of grief that matched her own. She saw someone who knew what it meant to lose everything, who understood the terrible weight of having to stay strong when all you wanted to do was fall apart. Something in her broke then, some final barrier she had been holding up against the tide of her grief. A sob tore from her throat, raw and painful, and then another. And then she was crying in earnest, great, heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. Vincent moved closer and hesitantly put his arm around her shoulders, giving her something solid to lean against. Florence turned into him, burying her face against his chest, her hands clutching at his shirt. He held her while she cried, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back, the other cradling the back of her head. He did not tell her it would be all right, did not offer empty platitudes. He just held her and let her grieve. She cried for her father, for the future they would never have, for the words left unsaid and the time stolen from them. She cried for her mother, gone 3 years, but still missed every day. She cried for the fear she had been holding at bay, the terror of facing Thornton alone, the weight of responsibility that now rested solely on her shoulders. She cried for the girl she had been before violence and loss had hardened her, for the innocence she could never get back. And through it all, Vincent held her, steady and solid and safe. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the sobs began to subside. Florence's breathing evened out and she pulled back, wiping at her face with trembling hands. She could not meet Vincent's eyes, mortified by her breakdown despite his reassurances. "I am sorry," she said again, her voice hoarse. "I got your shirt all wet." "Shirt's dry," Vincent said. He reached up and gently wiped a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. "How do you feel?" Florence took inventory. Her head ached, her eyes felt swollen, and her throat was raw, but beneath all of that, there was a lightness she had not felt in days. The pressure that had been building in her chest, threatening to suffocate her, had eased. Tired, she admitted, but better. Lighter. "Grief is like that," Vincent said. "You have to let it out, or it will poison you from the inside. There is no shame in it, Florence, no weakness in acknowledging pain." "How did you do it?" Florence asked, looking at him properly now. "When your family died, how did you keep going?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I did not. Not at first. I spent about 6 months drunk, picking fights, trying to get myself killed in ways that could be called accidents. Then one day I woke up in a jail cell in some town I did not even remember the name of, and I realized that if I kept going the way I was going, I would be dead within a year. And if I died, then the raiders who killed my family would have won completely. They would have taken everything." He looked at her, his eyes serious. "So I made a choice. I chose to live. Not because it was easy, not because the grief went away, but because living, surviving, that was the only revenge I could take. Every day I kept going was a day they did not win." Florence absorbed his words, turning them over in her mind. "I want them to pay," she said quietly. "Thornton and his men. I want them to face justice for what they did." "They will," Vincent said. "But first we need to keep you alive and keep your ranch safe. Justice does not mean much if you are dead." "No," Florence agreed. She took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders, pulling herself back together. Thank you, Vincent, for this, for understanding, for not making me feel foolish. Anytime, Vincent said. He stood and offered her his hand, pulling her to her feet. And Florence, if you need to do this again, if it gets to be too much, you come find me, day or night. I meant what I said. You are safe to feel with me. Florence squeezed his hand, holding on for just a moment longer than necessary. I will remember that. They walked out of the barn together, and for the first time since her father's death, Florence felt like maybe she could survive this. Not alone, but with someone who understood, someone who saw her as more than just a mask of strength, someone who saw her as human. Over the following weeks, a new pattern emerged. During the day, Florence was the iron-willed ranch owner, making decisions, giving orders, showing no weakness to the hands or to the world. But in the evening, she and Vincent would find time to talk, usually while doing evening chores or sitting on the porch after dinner. They talked about everything and nothing. Vincent told her about his travels, about the different towns he had seen, the strange and wonderful people he had met. Florence told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother's garden that she still tried to maintain, about her father's patient teaching and her mother's fierce love. They talked about horses and cattle and the weather, about books they had read and places they wanted to see. And slowly, carefully, Florence found herself opening up in ways she never had with anyone. She told Vincent about the pressure she felt, about the fear that she was not enough to hold the ranch together. She told him about the nightmares that woke her in the middle of the night, about the sound of gunshots that echoed in her dreams. And Vincent listened, never judging, always understanding, sharing his own struggles and fears in return. One evening, about a month after her father's death, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Florence had just finished telling him about a particularly difficult negotiation with a cattle buyer, and Vincent had offered some advice based on his own experiences. You are good at this, Florence said suddenly. Talking, listening, helping people feel heard. Did you learn that somewhere? Vincent shrugged. My mother used to say that most people do not need advice, they need someone to listen. I guess I took that to heart. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was, Vincent agreed. She could talk a rattlesnake out of striking and make it feel good about the decision. Florence laughed, a real laugh that surprised them both. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, Vincent said. She always admired strength in women, said women had to be twice as tough as men because the world made them fight twice as hard for half as much. She was right about that, Florence said. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, Vincent, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why have you stayed? Florence turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. I know I hired you, and I am grateful, but you could have moved on by now. Thornton has not made any more direct moves. You could find easier work somewhere else, so why stay? Vincent met her gaze, and the honesty in his eyes made her breath catch. Because I care about what happens to you, he said simply. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a job. You matter to me, Florence, your safety, your happiness, your success with this ranch, it all matters. I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to go. Florence felt her heart start to pound. She could not name the emotion that swelled in her chest, equal parts terror and hope. I do not want you to go, she said quietly. Then I am staying, Vincent said. He reached over and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. It was the first deliberately affectionate gesture he had made, and it sent warmth flooding through her. They sat like that as the sun sank below the horizon, hands linked, something unspoken but profound passing between them. Florence felt the walls she had built so carefully beginning to crumble, felt herself opening up to possibilities she had never let herself consider before. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The peace did not last. 2 days later, Jack came riding in at full gallop, his horse lathered and his face grim. Florence and Vincent were working on repairing a section of fence near the house, and they both dropped their tools when they saw him coming. "Trouble," Jack called out as he reined in. "The water." "What about the water?" Florence demanded, fear knotting her stomach. "Someone cut the line from the spring. The stock tank is down to half and the cattle are starting to get restless. If we do not get water flowing again soon, we are going to have serious problems." Florence exchanged a look with Vincent. "Thornton." "Has to be," Vincent agreed. He turned to Jack. "How bad is the damage?" "Bad enough. The pipe is cut clean through in 3 places and someone tossed a dead animal into the spring itself. We are going to need to clean that out before we can even think about running water again." "Get every available man on it," Florence ordered. "I want that spring cleaned and those pipes replaced by tomorrow, whatever it takes. Vincent, you and I will ride into town and see about getting supplies." They saddled horses and rode hard toward Stockton, arriving at the general store just before noon. The proprietor, a nervous little man named Herbert Walsh, looked uncomfortable when they started ordering pipe and fittings. "Miss Morrison, I'm not sure I can extend credit right now," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Times being what they are." "What do you mean?" Florence's voice was dangerously quiet. "My father has bought from you for 15 years. We have never missed a payment." I know," Herbert wrung his hands. "But Mr. Thornton, he said that anyone who helps you is going against him, and I have got a business to think about, and a family." "So you are going to let my cattle die of thirst because Marcus Thornton scared you," Florence said flatly. "I am sorry, Miss Morrison." "I truly am." Vincent stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Mr. Walsh, you are going to sell us those supplies, and you are going to do it now." "Is that a threat?" Herbert's voice shook. "It is a promise," Vincent said. "You can be scared of Thornton, that is your right. But right now I'm standing right here and I'm telling you that if you do not sell us what we need, you are going to have a much bigger problem than Thornton's displeasure." Herbert looked at Vincent, then at Florence, then back at Vincent. Whatever he saw in Vincent's eyes made him nod quickly. All right, just please do not tell Thornton I helped." "Your cowardice is your own business," Florence said coldly. "Just get me the supplies." They loaded everything into the wagon and headed back to the ranch. Florence was silent for most of the ride, anger radiating from her in waves. Finally, she said, "He has the whole town scared. No one will stand up to him." "Fear is a powerful weapon," Vincent acknowledged, "but it only works as long as people let it control them. Eventually, someone will push back." "That someone appears to be me," Florence said, "and I'm running out of resources to do it with." When they got back to the ranch, they found the situation was even worse than they had thought. Not only had the water been sabotaged, but someone had cut sections of fence in the east pasture, and 20 head of cattle were missing. "Stolen or scattered," Jack reported, his face grim. "We found tracks heading north, but they split up. Could take days to track them all down, and we have got the water situation to deal with." Florence made a decision. "Split the men. Half on water, half tracking the cattle. I want every head we can recover back here by the end of the week." It was 3 days of brutal work. They cleaned the spring, replaced the pipes, and got water flowing again. They tracked down 16 of the 20 missing cattle, but 4 were gone for good, either stolen or dead somewhere in the hills. The loss represented a significant hit to the ranch's finances, and Florence knew Thornton knew it. She was exhausted running on coffee and stubborn will when Vincent found her in the barn late one evening. She was checking on one of the recovered cows, a pregnant heifer that had torn her leg during her time away. "You need to sleep," Vincent said without preamble. "I need to make sure she does not get an infection," Florence countered. "This heifer is carrying what could be a valuable calf. I cannot afford to lose either of them." "Florence." Vincent said her name gently and she stopped, her hands stilling on the bandage she was wrapping. "You have not slept more than a few hours in 3 days. You're going to collapse if you keep this up." "I am fine," she insisted, but even she could hear the lie in her voice. Vincent moved closer, placing his hands on her shoulders, gently turning her to face him. "You do not have to do this alone. Let me help. Let the men help. You are trying to carry everything yourself, and it is going to break you." "If I do not carry it, who will?" Florence's voice cracked. "This ranch is my responsibility. Every cow, every dollar, every decision. If I fail, I lose everything my parents built. I cannot let that happen." "You will not fail," Vincent said firmly, "but you cannot succeed if you work yourself to death either. Please, Florence, go get some sleep. I will finish up here. The heifer will be fine." Florence wanted to argue, but she was so tired her bones ached. "All right," she said finally, but if anything changes, I will come get you immediately," Vincent promised. "Now go." Florence stumbled toward the house, and Vincent watched her go, concern etched on his face. She was pushing herself too hard, burning through reserves she did not have. He understood why, understood the driving need to prove herself, to protect what was hers, but he also knew that if she kept going like this, Thornton would not have to do anything more. She would destroy herself. He finished tending the heifer, and then did a circuit of the property, checking fences, checking livestock, making sure everything was secure for the night. When he finally made it back to the bunkhouse, most of the other hands were already asleep, exhausted from the long days of hard work. Jack was still awake, sitting on the edge of his bunk and cleaning his rifle. He looked up when Vincent entered. "She all right?" "She will be," Vincent said, "once she gets some rest." "Miss Florence is the stubbornest woman I ever met," Jack said, shaking his head. "She's like her father that way. Once she sets her mind to something, there is no moving her." "Stubborn will only get you so far," Vincent said. "Eventually, you need to be willing to accept help." "She is accepting help," Jack pointed out. "She hired you, did not she? And she is listening to my advice about the ranch operations?" "That is different from really letting people in," Vincent said, "and from trusting that they will not leave or betray her." Jack gave him a long, considering look. "You care about her, more than just as an employer." Vincent did not see any point in denying it. "Yeah, I do." "She cares about you too," Jack said. "I have seen the way she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching. Like you are the one solid thing in a world that is trying to tear her apart." He set down his rifle. "You planning to stick around after this trouble with Thornton is resolved?" "If she will have me," Vincent said honestly. "I know I'm just a drifter, no family, no real prospects, but I would like to stay, if that is what she wants." "Then you better tell her that," Jack said, "because that woman needs to know she has something to hold on to besides this ranch. She needs to know that someone chooses to stay with her, not because they are being paid or because they owe her, but just because they want to be with her." Vincent nodded slowly. Jack was right. Florence needed to hear the words, needed to know that his feelings were real and not just a product of proximity or circumstance, but the timing had to be right. She was under enough pressure without him adding declarations of love to the mix. The next morning, Florence woke up feeling more rested than she had in days. The sun was already well up, and she realized with shock that she had slept through dawn for the first time since her father's death. She dressed quickly and hurried outside, expecting to find everything in chaos. Instead, she found the ranch running smoothly. The hands were going about their usual tasks, and Vincent was working with one of the younger horses in the corral, his movements patient and sure. He looked up as she approached, a smile crossing his face. "Good morning. Sleep well?" "Too well," Florence said. "I should have been up hours ago." "You needed the rest," Vincent said, "and everything here is fine. Jack has the men working on reinforcing the fences, and I have been giving this young one some basic training. He has got potential." Florence watched Vincent work with the horse, noting the gentle way he moved, the calm confidence that put the young animal at ease. He was good with animals, patient and understanding. It occurred to her that he was the same way with people, with her. "Vincent," she said, and he turned to look at her fully. "I wanted to thank you for everything, for helping with the ranch, for being patient with me, for being someone I can talk to. I do not think I could have made it through this past month without you." Vincent tied off the horse and came over to lean on the fence beside her. You are stronger than you think, Florence. You would have made it, but I'm glad I could help make it easier. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Florence said, "What will you do after this is over, after Thornton is dealt with?" "I was hoping you would let me stay on," Vincent said, his voice carefully neutral. "If you wanted. I have come to like it here. The land is good, the work is honest, and the company," he smiled at her, "the company is exceptional." Florence felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I would like that. You staying. Very much." "Then it is settled," Vincent said. He reached over and took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comfortable. "We face Thornton together, and then we figure out what comes next." That afternoon brought the next crisis. A rider came galloping into the ranch yard, his horse wild-eyed and foaming. It was Tom Parker, one of the younger hands who had been checking the north boundary. "Fire!" he gasped out. "The old Johnson place is burning, and the wind is blowing this way. If it jumps the creek, the whole north pasture could go up." Florence did not hesitate. "Get every man, every bucket, every wet blanket we have. Move the cattle in the north pasture south. Tom, ride to the neighbors, get anyone who can help. Vincent, with me." They mobilized with the efficiency of people who knew that every second counted. The old Johnson place was an abandoned homestead about 2 miles from the Morrison ranch, nothing but a rotted outhouse and a few outbuildings. But the dry grass around it would burn fast, and if the fire got into the Morrison grazing land, it could wipe out months of growth and endanger the cattle. By the time they got there, the fire had already consumed the house and was racing through the grass, driven by a stiff wind. Smoke billowed into the sky, and the heat was intense even at a distance. "This was set deliberately, Vincent said, pointing to scorch marks near what looked like multiple ignition points. "Someone wanted to make sure it burned hot and fast." "Thornton," Florence said through gritted teeth, "he is escalating." They fought the fire for hours, beating back flames with wet blankets, digging fire breaks with whatever tools they had. More help arrived from neighboring ranches, men and women who knew that fire was every rancher's nightmare and that what threatened one threatened all. By the time they got it under control, it was nearly midnight. 300 acres of grazing land had been lost, but they had managed to save the creek and the land beyond it. Everyone was exhausted, covered in soot and ash, eyes burning from smoke. Florence stood looking at the blackened landscape, her face expressionless. Vincent came up beside her, his own face streaked with ash. "We saved most of it," he said. "It could have been worse." "It will be worse," Florence said. "Thornton is not going to stop. He will keep attacking, keep destroying until there is nothing left worth fighting for, and then he will take what remains." "Not if we stop him first," Vincent said. Florence turned to look at him. "How? He has more men, more money, more influence. What do we have that can stand against that?" "We have the truth," Vincent said, "and we have proof now. This fire, the sabotage to your water, your father's murder, put it all together, and it paints a clear picture of a man willing to do anything to get what he wants. We take that to the law." "The sheriff is in Thornton's pocket?" Florence said bitterly. "Then we go over his head. The marshal in Sacramento. Hell, the governor if we have to. But we do not just sit here and wait for him to destroy you." Florence studied Vincent's face, seeing the determination there, the unwavering support. Something shifted in her, some final piece clicking into place. This man, this drifter, who had ridden into her life at her darkest moment, had become the most important person in her world. She trusted him completely, relied on him absolutely, and somewhere along the way she had fallen in love with him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it felt right, felt inevitable, like the sun rising or the seasons changing. "All right," she said, "we fight back. We gather evidence, we get witnesses, and we take Thornton down legally. But Vincent, if this goes wrong, if he comes for us directly." "Then we defend ourselves," Vincent said, "and we do not back down. You are not alone in this, Florence. Whatever happens, we face it together. Florence stepped closer to him, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his gray-blue eyes. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have walked away a dozen times. Because I love you, Vincent said simply. I think I have loved you since I saw you refuse to break despite everything that was happening. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I want to be by your side not because you need protecting, but because being with you makes me want to be a better man. Florence's breath caught. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Men had complimented her looks, had praised her ranch management, but no one had ever seen past the armor to the woman beneath and loved that woman anyway. I love you too, she said, and the words felt like freedom. I did not want to. I tried not to. But you made it impossible not to fall in love with you. You see me, Vincent, not the mask I show the world, but the real me, and you do not find that person weak or lacking. That person is incredible, Vincent said. He reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away smudges of ash. You are incredible. He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Florence felt like she was coming home. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring all of her fear and hope and love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. We are going to get through he promised. Together. Together, Florence agreed. The next few days were spent gathering evidence. Vincent rode to neighboring ranches, collecting statements from people who had been pressured by Thornton or had witnessed his men's activities. Florence went through her father's papers and found correspondence that showed the escalating threats Thornton had made before his murder. Jack talked to the other ranch hands, getting them to agree to testify about what they had seen and heard. It was dangerous work. Thornton's men were everywhere, and more than once Vincent came back from his rounds with reports of being followed or warned off, but he persisted, and slowly they built a case. On a Thursday morning 2 weeks after the fire, Florence and Vincent loaded into the wagon and started the long drive to Sacramento. They had arranged to meet with a territorial marshal, a man named John Garrett, who had a reputation for honesty and had no connections to Stockton or Thornton. The journey took most of the day, and they arrived in Sacramento as the sun was setting. They found a respectable boarding house and got 2 rooms, though they spent most of the evening together in the small parlor, going over their evidence one more time. This has to work, Florence said, looking at the stack of papers and affidavits they had collected. If it does not, I do not know what else we can do. It will work, Vincent said. He reached across the small table and took her hand. You have enough here to show a clear pattern of harassment, intimidation, and murder. Garrett will have to act. The next morning they presented themselves at the marshal's office. John Garrett turned out to be a tall, lean man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to their story without interruption, examining the evidence they presented with careful attention. When they finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. This is serious. If even half of what you are saying is true, Marcus Thornton has committed multiple crimes, including murder. It is all true, Florence said firmly, and we can provide witnesses. Garrett nodded slowly. I will need to investigate, verify some of this information, but assuming it checks out, I will come to Stockton and arrest Thornton and any of his men we can prove were involved. He looked at Florence seriously. You understand this is going to cause trouble. Thornton is a powerful man with friends in high places. He will fight this. Let him fight, Florence said. I'm not backing down. I can see that, Garrett said with a hint of a smile. All right, give me 3 days to verify what you have given me, and then I will head to Stockton with enough deputies to handle whatever trouble arises. In the meantime, you two should go home and stay alert. If Thornton gets wind of this, he might make a move before I can get there. They thanked him and left, both feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. They made the long journey back to Stockton, arriving late that night. Florence was exhausted, but also energized by the prospect that they might actually win this fight. Over the next 3 days, they prepared for whatever was coming. The ranch hands were told to be ready for trouble, and extra watches were set. Vincent spent hours teaching Florence to quick draw her pistol, honing skills her father had started teaching her years ago. "You are getting faster," Vincent observed as she cleared leather in under a second for the 5th time in a row. "I have good motivation to improve," Florence said. She holstered the gun and rolled her shoulders, working out the tension. "Vincent, if something happens to me—" "Nothing is going to happen to you," Vincent interrupted. "But if it does," Florence insisted, "I want you to know that these past few months have been the best of my life. Even with everything that has happened, even with all the pain and fear, having you here, loving you, that has made it all bearable, you have given me hope when I thought I had none left." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Nothing is going to happen to you," he repeated. "I am going to keep you safe, and we are going to get through this. And then we are going to have a long, happy life together. I promise you that." Florence held on to him, letting herself believe it, letting herself hope. They stood like that until the dinner bell rang, calling them back to the present and the 100 small tasks that made up ranch life. On the 4th day, Marshal Garrett arrived with 4 deputies, all hard-faced men who looked like they knew their business. He came to the ranch first, confirming details and preparing his case. Then, with Florence and Vincent accompanying them, they rode into Stockton. News of the marshal's arrival spread through town like wildfire. People lined the streets, watching as the law enforcement contingent rode up to the offices where Marcus Thornton conducted his business. Thornton himself was inside, and when Garrett entered with his deputies, the railroad man's face went white and then red with fury. "What is the meaning of this?" Thornton demanded. "Marcus Thornton, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, arson, destruction of property, and intimidation," Garrett said, his voice carrying through the building. "You have the right to defend yourself in court, but right now you are coming with me." Thornton looked at Florence, who stood behind the deputies, her face impassive. "You," he snarled, "you stupid girl, do you have any idea what you have done? I will destroy you for this. I will take everything you have." "You already tried," Florence said coldly, "and you failed. You killed my father, you tried to break me, and you failed. Now you are going to face justice for what you did." "This is not justice," Thornton spat. "This is a vindictive child playing at revenge." "No," Vincent stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. "This is a strong woman refusing to be a victim. And if you try anything, if any of your men so much as look at her wrong, they will answer to me." Garrett's deputies stepped forward, and after a tense moment, Thornton allowed himself to be handcuffed. They led him out of the building, and the crowd in the street parted to let them through. Florence watched him go, feeling a complicated mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice was being done, but it would not bring her father back. It would not erase the trauma of the past months. But it was something. It was closure. Over the next weeks, the legal process ground forward. Several of Thornton's men were also arrested, including Dutch Carmichael, who broke under questioning and confessed to William Morrison's murder. Thornton's empire began to crumble as investigators uncovered evidence of fraud, bribery, and numerous other crimes beyond what had been done to the Morrison ranch. The trial was held in Sacramento, and Florence testified about her father's murder, about the attacks on her ranch, about Thornton's threats. She spoke clearly and firmly, and the jury heard every word. Vincent testified about what he had witnessed, and numerous other ranchers and townspeople came forward with their own stories of intimidation and harassment. The verdict came down in early October. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Thornton was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and several of his men received similar sentences. For the first time in months, Florence felt like she could breathe freely. She and Vincent returned to the ranch to find it running smoothly under Jack's management. The cattle were healthy, the grass was growing back in the burned sections, and the ranch hands greeted their return with genuine smiles. That evening, Florence and Vincent sat on the porch watching the sunset. just as they had so many times before. But this time, the tension that had hung over them for months was gone. They were free, truly free, to build the life they wanted. "So," Vincent said, taking her hand, "now that the trouble is over, I suppose I should ask you properly. Florence Morrison, will you marry me?" Florence felt tears prick her eyes, but these were happy tears, the kind she did not need to hide. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Vance." They were married in November in the same church where they had buried her father. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and the ranch hands, but it was perfect. Florence wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and Vincent wore a new suit that Jack had insisted he buy for the occasion. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her thoroughly, and the small congregation cheered. They had a celebration at the ranch, with food and music and dancing that lasted long into the night. Later, after all the guests had left or gone to bed, Florence and Vincent stood together on the porch of the house that was now theirs. Florence leaned against her husband, feeling safe and loved and complete in a way she had never experienced before. "I never thought I would have this," she said quietly. "After my father died, after everything with Thornton, I thought I would always be alone, always fighting." "You will never be alone again," Vincent promised. "We are partners now in everything. This ranch, this life, we build it together." "Together," Florence agreed, and the word had never sounded sweeter. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Vincent proved to have a gift for horse breeding, and they started a side business raising quality stock that became sought after throughout California. Florence's head for business and Vincent's skills with animals complemented each other perfectly. In the spring of 1880, Florence discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening while they were checking on a mare about to foal, and he swept her up in his arms and spun her around laughing with pure joy. Their first child, a son they named William after Florence's father, was born in December. He had Vincent's dark hair and Florence's determination, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he was loved beyond measure. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Sarah, named for Vincent's sister. She had her mother's quick mind and her father's gentle heart, and she wrapped both parents around her tiny finger from day one. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Jack stayed on as foreman and became like family. Some of the other ranch hands married and settled nearby, building a small community of people who looked out for each other. Florence made sure to be fair but firm with everyone who worked for her, and in return she earned loyalty and respect. There were still challenges, of course. Droughts and market fluctuations, injuries and illnesses, the 100 small crises that made up ranch life. But Florence and Vincent faced them all together, and nothing ever seemed insurmountable when they were side by side. One evening in the summer of 1885, when William was 5 and Sarah was 3, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. The children were playing with a wooden horse Vincent had carved, their laughter bright in the warm air. Florence sat in her rocking chair with Vincent beside her, watching their children with contentment. "Do you remember the day we met?" Florence asked, reaching for Vincent's hand. "Every detail," Vincent said. "You were standing behind that wagon, blood on your shoulder, and you had the most stubborn, fierce expression on your face. I knew right then that you were someone special." "I was terrified," Florence admitted, "but I could not let them see me cry or break. I thought if I showed weakness, it would be the end of everything." "You were the strongest person I had ever met," Vincent said, "but I'm glad you eventually let me see the real you, the woman beneath all that armor, the woman who felt things deeply and loved fiercely. You told me I was safe to feel with you," Florence remembered, "and you were right. You are still the only person who sees all of me, the strong and the scared, the capable and the broken, and you love all of it." "I love all of you," Vincent confirmed, "every single part, and I always will." Florence squeezed his hand, watching their children play, watching the sun set over land that was theirs, truly theirs now, built on hard work and love and partnership. She thought about the girl she had been, the one who had been so determined never to show weakness, never to cry, never to need anyone. That girl had been strong, but she had also been lonely. This woman, the one she had become with Vincent's love and support, was stronger still, because she had learned that true strength was not about standing alone. It was about knowing when to accept help, when to let people in, when to trust that someone else could carry part of the load. "I am glad you rode toward the sound of gunfire that day," Florence said. "I am glad you stayed. I am glad you loved me." "I am glad you let me," Vincent said. "Loving you has been the best decision I ever made." As the sun set and the stars began to appear, William climbed into his mother's lap, and Sarah settled against her father's side. They sat together, a family, watching the night sky emerge. Florence felt a peace she had never imagined possible all those years ago when she had knelt beside her father's body and sworn she would never let anyone see her break. She had not broken, but she had bent, had learned flexibility, had discovered that allowing herself to be vulnerable with the right person was not weakness, but courage. She had let Vincent see her cry, see her fear, see her doubt. And he had loved her not despite those things, but because of them, because they made her human and real. The ranch that her parents had built with their blood and sweat and dreams had not just survived, it had thrived. And more than that, it had become the foundation for a new family, a new generation who would grow up knowing love and safety and the value of hard work. As they sat there in the gathering darkness, with their children drowsy and content, Florence looked at her husband and saw her future, full of love, full of challenge, full of life lived to the fullest. She had learned so much in the years since that terrible day on the Stockton Road. She had learned that strength came in many forms. She had learned that accepting help was not surrender, but wisdom. She had learned that love was worth the risk of pain, that opening your heart was the bravest thing you could do. Most of all, she had learned that she did not have to face the world alone. She had a partner, a true partner, who would stand beside her through everything life brought. Together they could weather any storm, overcome any obstacle, build any dream. The years continued to roll by, bringing more joy than sorrow, more triumph than defeat. They added more children to their family, 3 more over the next decade, filling the house with noise and laughter and love. The ranch grew until it was one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and exceptional horses. Florence became a respected voice in the ranching community, sought out for advice, and admired for her business acumen. She never forgot where she had come from, the struggles she had faced, and she made it her mission to help other women trying to make their way in the male-dominated world of ranching. She mentored young women, lent money to those starting out, and created a network of support that helped dozens of families establish themselves. Vincent remained her constant, her rock, the person she turned to in both triumph and trouble. Their love only deepened over the years, growing richer and more complex as they shared experiences, raised children, and built a life together. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration, but they always worked through them, always came back to the fundamental truth that they were stronger together than apart. When they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children, now grown with families of their own, threw them a party that brought together nearly everyone in the county. There was music and dancing and speeches praising the Vances for their contributions to the community. But the moment Florence treasured most came late in the evening when she and Vincent slipped away from the crowd to stand alone on the porch of their home. 25 years, Vincent said, shaking his head in wonder. It has gone by so fast. And yet it feels like I have known you forever, Florence said. She was 53 now, her dark hair threaded with silver, lines on her face earned through years of sun and wind and laughter. But her eyes were still bright, still full of the fire that had first drawn Vincent to her. "Do you have any regrets?" Vincent asked. Florence considered the question seriously. "I regret that my parents could not see what we built here. I regret the people we lost along the way. But this life, This choice to marry you, to build a future together? Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vincent Vance. The feeling is entirely mutual, Florence Vance, Vincent said. He was 57 now, his hair more gray than dark, his face weathered by a lifetime of outdoor work, but he was still strong, still steady, still the man who had ridden toward the gunfire to help a woman in trouble. They kissed then, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership, of shared struggles and shared triumphs. When they broke apart, they could hear the party continuing inside, could hear their children's laughter and their grandchildren's voices raised in song. We built something good here, Florence said, something that will outlast us. We did, Vincent agreed. Your parents would be proud of you, Florence, of what you have accomplished, of the woman you have become. I could not have done it without you, Florence said. That day you told me I was safe to feel with you. That changed everything. You gave me permission to be human, to be whole. You loved me even when I was hard to love, even when I was pushing everyone away. That gift, that unconditional acceptance, that is what made all of this possible. Vincent pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars, listening to the sounds of family and celebration. They had come so far from that dusty road where they had first met. They had faced down enemies, survived heartbreak, overcome obstacles that would have broken lesser people, but they had done it together, and that had made all the difference. The years that remained to them were good ones. They grew old together gracefully, stepping back from the day-to-day management of the ranch as their children took over, but always remaining involved, always offering guidance and support. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a large, sprawling family that included children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Florence lived to be 74, passing peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1924 with Vincent holding her hand. He followed her less than a year later, unable to imagine a world without his beloved wife in it. They were buried side by side in the Stockton Cemetery, their graves marked with a simple stone that bore both their names and a single line, "Together always." The ranch they had built continued for generations, passed down through their children and their children's children. The story of Florence and Vincent became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a testament to love and partnership and the strength that comes from facing life's challenges together. People remembered Florence as the woman who had refused to break, who had stood against powerful enemies and won. But those who knew her best remembered something more important, that she had learned that true strength included vulnerability, that allowing herself to love and be loved had not made her weak, but infinitely stronger. And they remembered Vincent as the cowboy who had ridden toward trouble instead of away from it, who had seen a woman in need and offered not just protection, but partnership, who had understood that the strongest people are often those who are most afraid of showing their fears. Their love story became the foundation of family identity, proof that even in the hardest times, in the wild and dangerous days of the Old West, love could flourish. That two people who found each other in the midst of violence and loss could build something beautiful and lasting. The Morrison Vance Ranch still operates today, now in its 6th generation of family ownership. And on the porch of the old ranch house, preserved as it was when Florence and Vincent lived there, visitors can still see the two rocking chairs where they sat together on countless evenings, watching the sun set over land they had claimed and held through strength, courage, and an abiding love that had conquered every obstacle. Their story reminds us that the greatest adventures are not always about conquering land or defeating enemies, but about conquering our own fears, defeating our own isolation, and having the courage to love deeply even when the world seems determined to break us. Florence learned that she did not have to face everything alone, that accepting help and love was not weakness, but wisdom. And Vincent learned that healing from loss came not from running away, but from running toward connection, from choosing to care deeply despite the risk of pain. Together, they built not just a ranch, but a legacy of love, partnership, and resilience that echoes through the generations. Their story, born in violence and grief, became one of triumph and joy, proving that even the darkest beginnings can lead to the brightest futures when two people face them, hand in hand, heart to heart, refusing to let the world's cruelty defeat their capacity for love. In the end, Florence did not let them see her cry or break in those terrible early days after her father's death. But she did let Vincent see her grief, her fear, her humanity. And in that vulnerability, in that willingness to be seen and loved completely, she found not weakness, but her greatest strength. Together, they proved that true partnership is not about one person being strong while the other is weak, but about both people being fully human, supporting each other through every storm, celebrating every victory, and building a life of meaning and joy one day at a time.